Hello, everybody. My name is Mary P. Mills. I'm a partner and editor at Tortoise. Welcome to Tortoise if you haven't been here before. Welcome to our newsroom, and welcome to a ThinkIn. It's sort of my duty as editor to start by explaining what a ThinkIn is, at which point I have to apologise to our member here, John, because I saw in the listing he's been 10 times before, so he's heard this spiel 10 times. So he could probably give it, or at the very least he's bored of it. But for those of you who haven't been 10 times before, I think it's not a panel event, it's a system of organised listening, and it's loosely based on a newspaper or a news organisation, news conference, where you take an idea, an interesting thought of the moment, and bash it around between you with the help of invited experts, and on a sort of interesting topic of the moment to help you come to a better informed point of view. For that reason, they work best when we hear from as many people in the room as possible. And for that reason, we have one crucial rule at a ThinkIn, which is no questions. That's because people often hide behind a question what they really want to say, but we don't want to hear your question. We want to hear your thoughts on this subject, and that will help us and improve our journalism. So please try and don't ask questions, but do talk up and tell us what you think. Bit of housekeeping before we get started. We love you talking about us on social media, but we don't love phones going off during the ThinkIn, so please turn them to silent if you haven't already. It's my duty to tell you that you're being filmed for anyone who can't be here and would like to watch for our sort of non-London or people who want to watch it later. So this little moving robot here is a camera, and these are microphones. And going across the screen here is our tortoise called Agatha, named after our founder's pet tortoise. And she makes her way slowly across the screen for an hour, and at the end a little flag goes up, and that means we're out of time and I have to stop. So please keep an eye on Agatha and stick your hand up if you have something to say. So I'll just take a moment to introduce our guests. We have here Helen Tupper. She is the CEO and co-founder of Amazing If, which aims to make work better for everyone. And she's also the author of The Squiggly Career, which is going to be on sale over there afterwards if you're interested. And it is FT Book of the Month, I have just learned, which talks about, it helps you for new ways of navigating work. We've got Dan Hegarty, who is a tech entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Habito, a free online mortgage broker. And he has had a squiggly career of his own, because I learned in reading about him today that he was previously a professional punk guitarist with a band called Serum. Am I right? I'm right, aren't I? And here we've got Francis Coppola, who is a finance and economics writer and a visiting fellow at Sheffield University.
Because I'm also a singer and a teacher.
Amazing.
Full of squiggly careers. As I said beforehand, I feel incredibly boring as a result of all these very squiggly careers. Very boring, straight, not squiggly at all. Before I come to the guests, before I'm going to be inspired by tonight, before I come to you guys, I just wanted to start by telling a little story of something that genuinely, it's going to sound made up this, but genuinely happened to me this week, which was, I was on my way to work, and I come in at Highbury and Islington tube station every day, which seems to have got more and more packed as the time has gone by. And it's getting sort of almost quite dangerous, you know, how rammed, and sometimes they have to shut people out before they let people in. Right? For the first time, I said to the station master this week, you know, what's happened to this station? It seems like it's getting really busy. And he said, well, it's because everyone's living so much longer, you see, and they're working so much later. And young people still come up, but people who are in London, it just can't cope. And I was like, all right, really? But it felt like a gift. And I just sort of wanted to take that to start with the room and ask, who thinks, you know, that the fact that we're living longer and working longer is a problem, and that we don't have infrastructure and workforces can't cope with our longer working lives? Just quick show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, you know, maybe like just less than 10 hands. And who thinks people should just be allowed to work as long as they like, and they're useful, and that's the way it is? We're living longer, and we should just be able to work as long as we like. You put your hand up for both. I'm coming to that in a minute. But it's also possible. So, Helen, I'll come to all of you in a minute, because I'd love to hear more about your thoughts, especially the lady at the back there, who was quite sort of hand up with the first one. But Helen, talk to me about your sort of point of view. You know, we spoke before this, and you said, you know, our idea of the 3-stage life is outdated.
Yeah.
Just talk about what you mean by that.
So I think there's a sort of an older concept of work, which is that like life has 3 stages and work fits within there. So you have like education, work, and retirement. And in that work bit, the kind of older view of it was that work was like a staircase, like a ladder. So every couple of years you would progress, you would move up, and that might be a new grade or some salary or a promotion, and you'd go from junior to senior to manager of 1 person and manager of 3 people, and then senior manager and then director, and then you'd be happy and then you'd retire. And that was a good career. But that's just not the way that work works anymore. And these career plans and people who operate with like a staircase mindset are finding themselves in a squiggly career, and it doesn't sit well because organisations are getting flatter and flatter. Today, the average career is 47 years, and that's factoring in a retirement age. I just think that's going to disappear, to be honest. But you can't climb a ladder in a non-hierarchical, flatter structure of work over and over.
Would you just tell me what you mean by organisations are getting flatter? Just there are fewer...
Yeah, so if you look at I used to work for Microsoft and they would call it like a span of control. And so they basically want to increase managers' spans of control. So you don't have so many, like 1 person managing 3 people and then the next one's managing 5, which like introduces hierarchy into an organisation. So what we try to help people do is to focus on progression rather than promotion. Like understand what progression in a squiggly career, which can happen in lots of different directions. Okay, so it could be horizontal. You might go back to something you've done before. You might leave an organisation and come back. That's called like being a boomerang employee. It's increasingly happening in organisations. And so when people think about the rewards of work being about progression, skill development, learning, curiosity, building their network, actually they can move, it really opens up their career. And then there isn't necessarily an end to it. When we were climbing a ladder, there was a top. There was a good destination, we did it, we left, that was it. In squiggly careers, and the FT article recently said that we're going to have as many as 4 different careers in one lifetime. So, we still talk about jobs for life. I don't think people talk about that much anymore. Maybe they don't talk about careers for life still, but actually 4 different careers, 4 dramatically different things. I've worked in marketing. I now run my own business. So I've kind of been a full-time employee for a corporate. I now work for a very small business, which is my own. I think I'm probably on my 2nd career, and I don't know how long I'm going to be working or if I'll ever stop working. But the point of a squiggly career is that if you know what motivates and drives you, so that's about your values, you know what you're good at, you've got belief in yourself, you've got confidence, you've got a really active network of people helping people, and you think much more about career possibilities than this rigid career plan, actually you don't need to stop working. As long as you can keep learning and you've got career possibilities, why stop? And why would an organisation want to lose the value that you provide at any age?
Thanks. And so, Dan, as I said, you are a squiggly career yourself. And you're deep in sort of startup culture, and actually you said something which really resonated with me on the phone, which is that sense in startup culture that actually the pressure on you is to make an unbelievable success of it, make loads of money, and then retire really early. So would you just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I guess sort of tech is a bit of an unusual beast because everybody is trying to create like vast monopolies using technology, destroy all of the incumbents, become extraordinarily rich, and then retire to 50 years of philanthropy, which is wonderful, not always realistic, and not necessarily the right thing, given some of the externalities these businesses create along the way. But yeah, it's something that resonated very much with me because we're now about 180 people, and our average age is probably about 30. So you've got like an awful lot of young people making very big decisions. We're a mortgage broker, so we're helping people make decisions about their financial lives, often about, to this topic, about their financial lives into retirement. And you've got a 24-year-old advising you on your financial options, which seems a little uncomfortable, like in terms of their kind of, their comprehension of your lived experience. So I think we're very conscious about the kind of the lack of cognitive diversity that exists in our own business, but more broadly in technology, and how we can work to combat that. But equally, it would be, I was saying to Mary on the phone, my mother-in-law, my thrice-sainted mother-in-law, who was like the director of a NHS trust, who had her medical license revoked on her 65th birthday. Like, no, just got a letter in the post being like, okay, it's done for you now. Like, thank you for all the 6,000 babies you've delivered, but you're done. And like literally, like went into a period of like very, very real depression as her like fundamental utility in the world was taken away from her. But the reality is that like I'm not sure what I could do with her at Habito. Like she's not computer literate. She wouldn't share much kind of common vernacular with the people who work there. And I think there's a gulf that needs to be bridged, and it's I guess that the challenge we face is trying to find a place to start, and perhaps that's maybe too much of a leap. But I certainly think that in our quest for kind of disruption and tearing up the rule book, we miss out on just enormous amounts of common sense and wisdom that is just being kind of pushed out into retirement and not utilised where it could be.
There was something that Mark Zuckerberg said once, and I'm going to quote it wrong, he said something about, you only hire people under 40 or 30. I think he even might have been 30 if he wants it. I think he's changed his mind on that since then. But when he was young, he was like, these are the only valuable people in your organisation. I want to come back to that mother-in-law story because I definitely heard a sort of murmur of acknowledgement from the audience there of people who have similar stories. But first, I'd just love to go to some slides that, you'll also find replicated in your handy little booklet that you were given when you came in. So the first slide is one I showed. We have actually, this is the second in a series of, living well till you're 100 and all the things you need to do. And I showed this at the first one, so you can see life expectancy increasing for men and women across all the decades. And the next slide is just a fact. Slide 2. Sorry. 1 million people aged 50 to 65 who are willing or would like to be working but aren't, so that's even pre what we would call retirement age. And nearly a quarter of employers think that their organisation is unprepared for an ageing workforce.
Can I jump in immediately and say the state pension age is not 65?
It is not, no. But what we had previously thought of as
it's actually 66.
66. I'm just going to come to you, actually. Because conveniently, because so you, before you came to this event, you put a little message out on Twitter, and this is what it said. This was yesterday, wasn't it? Yesterday. Slide 3. So Twitter, I've been a freelancer for over 20 years. I'm fed up with this feast or famine caper. I want a proper job with a decent, stable income, but I'm now 60. Am I too old? Tell me how people reacted to that.
Well, it was very interesting, the reaction. I got one person tweeting me back saying, had I been at the wine again? Words to that effect. I got a few people saying, maybe too old to be... Somebody came back saying, maybe too old to be hired, but you could do the hiring. Start your own business and hire people. I've been a freelancer for 20 years. That means I run my own business. Duh. And so, the widespread misunderstanding even about what freelancing is. It was a lot of things along those lines. I was quite disappointed that there seemed to be a lot of people who thought that 60 was too old to expect what we might call permanent employment. It was absolutely fine to start your own business, run your own business, be a freelancer, be a non-executive director. If you're that senior, if you're not that senior, you could probably possibly get somebody tweeted me from the United States saying you could get a minimum wage job in Walmart's as a greeter. I said, yeah, the equivalent in the UK is working in B&Q or a garden centre, which again seems to be something that people think that's what older people do.
Volunteer at the National Trust. Volunteering.
Excuse me, I've got a mortgage I have to pay until I'm 65. How am I supposed to pay that? There did seem to be a huge assumption, I encountered this a lot, not just on this occasion, but generally, that somebody of my age doesn't need to earn their living. And it's not true. So if, people will get in touch with me saying, oh, we'd really like you to sort of get involved in this or something, we can give you a platform or whatever, but we can't pay you, but we'd really like your input and your chance to get your ideas out there. And they will have a skeleton staff. They'll have a staff, but they don't want me as part of their staff. It's very often they don't even want to pay at all. And a lot of it is because they seem to assume that anybody of my age, particularly somebody who's worked in the finance sector as I have, must of course be rolling in it, doesn't need to earn their living, and that's not true. So there are lots of assumptions, I think, about older people and kind of what they need and what they want and what their relevance is. But the thing that struck me above all was this kind of assumption that everybody seemed to be making, that older people, permanent employment for older people was for the birds. And I found that really quite worrying.
Thanks. I'd love to come to the room now. I hate picking on people. On the other hand, your hand was the first to go up when I said, you know, we don't have the infrastructure, perhaps people should be forced to retire, and I actually wasn't sure anyone was going to put their hand up for that. Would you just say your name and talk me why you think that? I'm talking to you, the lady at the back with the glasses, yes.
Me?
Yeah. So
Well,
sorry to pick on
I
you.
think it was exactly what you've said, that I think there's a disconnect between, you know, people saying the pension age has got to go up, and there's a disconnect between what people think older age is and what modern older age is. And I've done exactly, I've had years and years of being self-employed, which was feast or famine, and I'm now in a full-time job, and it's knackering. I love it, I enjoy it, but it is knackering, and keeping, you know, the pace of things, and, you know, we've just gone from Word to Google Docs, and then we've got Slack, you know, all this. And so not only am I rolling around with the job, I'm learning all of this at the same time, and, you know, we've got a little deadline before all of our Office, Word and Excel will be removed, and we will only be able to use Google. So, you know, it's extra energy used to keep pace. And I'm going to have to work until I'm, well, yeah, basically. I think it's the disconnect that worries me, and being in the office space, which I'm really proud of being and really happy. I mean, I'm just about 60, but, you know, I think to myself, crikey, I've got to try and keep this going for about another 15 years. How am I going to do that?
When you're knackered.
When you're knackered, and how are you going to do that when the system around you doesn't appreciate your skills? And you've got waves of young, you know, cohorts of younger people coming, AI changing the way that things are going to be done. There's a lot to factor in, which I think is exciting, but equally, I think and this is one of the topics I've brought up when I've been here before, the intergenerational workspace, workplace.
What's your name, sorry?
Harriet.
Harriet, did you find it difficult to get back into sort of full-time employment after your sort of feast or famine freelance years?
No.
It wasn't tricky?
I mean, I don't kind of publicise my age. I turn up and I'm in the interview and people want me, but they're wanting me on the existing system, which is, you know, you slot into this system, you get on the hamster wheel and off you go.
Yeah.
And so creating systems that have space for everybody, you know.
Which is what you were saying, that you know, you see these people, old people, but you don't think they can fit into the system that you've got. There are a couple of other hands. The lady in orange.
Hi.
Do say your name.
Yeah, I'm Jo Cumber. I'm a pensions correspondent at the FT, so I'm really interested in this discussion, and particularly interested in what Helen had to say about changing concept of career, moving from something that was about progression and promotion to a flatter structure. I think my first thought was that's really going to exacerbate the retirement savings crisis, because even though the ideas of a career are changing to away from staircase, the traditional drivers for people wanting promotion haven't, and that is because they need money. They want, you know, they need financial security to pay bills. They've got student debt. They need the promotion to actually get more money. So if there is a flatter structure, is there less opportunities to earn more through promotion? How are they going to save enough? They already aren't saving enough in the young generations adequately for retirement. So we're just storing up more problems for the future with flatter career structures.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective, probably one that I've not ultimately considered. I think our start point is what keeps people engaged and productive in their work, and actually how do they have choice about what that looks like. But I don't think I've gone on to, okay, well, if I have choice, if actually, you know, if I use my strengths and I kind of buck the trend in terms of I'm going to go do a job I don't want to do just because that's the one that my manager thinks I should do, then what's the implication of that on my long-term savings? I probably haven't answered the question of that. One thing I have really noticed really interesting, so one of the areas that we talk about quite a lot is about confidence, and we call this thing called confidence gremlin. So if anyone's looked at it, like limiting beliefs, things that hold you back. And when we started after this, I used to hear a lot of, like, one of the common confidence remnants was, I'm too young. I used to hear that quite a lot working with people. They'd be like, I'm too young to apply for this job, I'm too young to be a manager, lots of assumptions about themselves not being able to do things. And now the organisations that we work with, so, you know, I don't know, HSBC, BT, Money Supermarket, lots of large organisations, I'm increasingly hearing a confidence gremlin from people who are in the workforce who are saying, I'm too old. So it's not even people who might be freelance trying to get back in or have left, it's people that they're there right now and they're saying, almost similar, they're like, I feel like I'm too old, there's lots of people coming in and they're working at pace and I don't feel as valued as I used to be, I feel like I'm out of date. And so they themselves, in the workforce today, are almost taking a gradual step back because they're feeling that they're not valued or they're not as worthy or they're not as knowledgeable. And that's, some of it might be assumption, some of it might be bias in the workplace that's kind of permeating the way they're working, but I'm not seeing a lot of it being addressed. I'm just seeing a lot of people stepping back in their careers because of those confidence gremlins.
Anecdotally, I would definitely say I know lots of people who feel like that. Who feel, I've done, you know, everyone's interested in, you know, journalism's a young person's game. Everyone's interested in these people, and you sort of see these people only in the sort of 40s or 50s, not old, especially if we're talking about not retiring by 66 or whatever, you know, just kind of counting themselves out. And I imagine that's the same in sort of tech as well. I just want to go on to the next slide for that reason, because that is about ageism in the workplace, which I just thought this fact was really interesting in the notebook, which 40% of employees over the age of 50 think their workplace is a policy related to preventing age discrimination, but nearly half of these people have said it makes no difference. And age discrimination is one of those things which, compared to you know, race discrimination, sex discrimination, gets almost no coverage, you know. Has anyone had any experience?
Can I say one more thing?
You can say as much as you like.
Where I work, which I won't say where it is, and I said, do you have a menopause policy? And they said, well, no, we've never thought about that, and quite frankly, all our employees are around the age of 30, so it's not relevant. And if there were older people in the place, they were men. So I think that's also something that is really important, because that's another factor in which that implicates this ability to work at pace.
Do organisations have menopause policies?
Well, I've been reading about how some of them should, and that these are things that some HR departments are beginning to bring in. But I mean, that's just a subsection of what that slide says. It's another area to consider if you're running a company.
I just wanted to bring up something actually, because to come to your point about pace and fitting into the existing system, is that when you were talking about how difficult it is to keep up with change and to slot into a full-time working and you know, sort of all that goes with that, I thought, you know, I hear the same things from, you know, people who have other strengths in their lives who are much younger. So people with young children, for example, people with caring responsibilities, also struggle to fit in with the present the system as it is. I mean, I've been a freelancer for 20 years, not through choice, but because I was bringing up young children and I had caring responsibilities, and I couldn't have done a kind of a full-time in the office job. You know, so maybe we should stop thinking of this as a problem of older people, but a problem with the existing system that was created for a world in which full-time work was the province of men and they had stay-at-home wives. And that died a long while ago. And interestingly, Helen, I remember having these exact same discussions in the 1980s when we used to call it a portfolio career. Yeah. And I was sitting here, and you were talking about, on average, about 4 careers in people's lives, and I was sitting here counting up how many I've had. I made about 7. So,
Squiggly. Yeah. I should say as well that Squiggly doesn't always mean changing career. Like, you can be. We work with organisations on something called career mobility. So it's basically staying in the same company. It doesn't have to be leaving your company. It's just about recognising that people can move from function to function, and they don't have to stay in one discipline. You get more, like you were talking about cognitive diversity. Actually, it's very helpful for cognitive diversity in an organisation if you have mobility. So it actually retains and engages and increases the cognitive diversity if people can have squiggly careers within a company. It's often when they don't have that they feel that they have to leave to get it. So I think it's a bit of a distinction from a portfolio career in that sense, but it is about giving people choice and options at all stages of their career.
Okay. Anyone else before? I just, because this thing about leaving was really interesting to me, because I think there was, again, in the notes, the next slide is, so this is just, I have to do the background because it was all too long to go on the slide, but in the notes it tells the story of a man. His name is, hang on, I've got it here, Winston Chen, who saw a TED talk about the power of time off, and he watched this TED talk and he was so inspired by it that, you know, he left his job where he'd been for a decade, you know, left his house, his car, packed 4 bags, him and his wife and the children moved to a small island in Arctic Norway for a year. And then it says, when he returned to the USA with no jobs waiting for them, we felt truly at ease. It dawned on me, our island year wasn't just a memorable adventure, it made us different people. The upsides of taking a mid-career year of retirement is potentially life-changing. I just love that idea. But I also think I just couldn't be that relaxed about it. I'm just not that person. And who here could do that? Just go, it's a lovely dream, isn't it? Just to go, I'm going to give it all up and go to Arctic Norway. I wouldn't choose Arctic Norway myself. But that's, when I hear you talk about Squiggly, I sort of think, I'd love to do that. I'd love to just give it all up and then come back in a year and be like, yeah, now I'm going to do this. But I don't feel like I'm lacking in confidence, but I don't have the confidence to do that, actually, in a world where, you know, you're constantly reading about jobs being, you know, reduced and AI and, you know, everything's so competitive and it's like, well, I can now just go off for a year. I don't believe I can. And that's, so when we talk about this, we talk about sort of changing the way, you know, we live and retiring a bit now and then coming back into work. And it seems to me like it's a wonderful pipe dream, but not something I could personally act on. Does anyone feel differently, or does anyone want to?
Just done
Sorry?
My father's just done exactly that.
What, just, was it Arctic Norway?
It wasn't. It was doing lots of
What's your name, sorry?
My name's Alex.
Alex.
It was doing lots of DIY at home and just taking a bit of a break, to be honest. But I think my experience of being with him in that period of his life was very interesting in terms of his renewed focus on work and what he wanted to do when he
So he didn't
decided
retire?
to go back. No, he took a big mini retirement break to understand what he wanted to do.
Did he leave his job and say, I am leaving this job?
Yeah.
Not, I'm leaving and I'd like to come back in a year?
Yeah, he just left and just thought, I just want to take some time. He didn't even have any money saved. He just wanted to take the time for himself, and I thought it was a very brave thing to do.
Do you mind me asking how old he was?
55.
Yeah, very, very brave,
So,
yeah.
like pre-retirement age, and it's absolutely changed his life in terms of thinking about the sort of career he then wanted to think about doing from going back at age 57 until he hit retirement.
What was he doing before?
He was a technical author, so wrote like manuals on how to fix planes and things like that.
And what does he say he wants to do now?
So he actually wants to be a postman, which is I think his end career goal, and I think will probably be his third career, but he's gone back to do something less stressful. He's gone back he realised that he didn't enjoy being in a management position anymore and decided to think about what he wanted for his career over the next years.
So many questions about your dad. I'm worried about sidetracking this event onto your dad, but I just asked, has he started being a postman yet? Has he started being a postman yet?
No, he hasn't.
I really want to know how it works out.
He's the sort of man where I know he'll do it one day. So
Good pension scheme.
Is anyone else?
I think you see that.
What's your name?
It's Rory.
Rory, hi Rory.
You see that with Lucy Calloway. I think she was probably a columnist at the FT. She set up this teacher training academy for kind of mid-career professionals. But interestingly, on the parent front, my mum did the opposite. She was a teacher for 20 years, a maths teacher, and then she went to General Assembly to train as a data scientist.
Amazing.
She flipped it, basically. Yeah.
But it's interesting the story you mentioned about your friend who reached retirement age and then no longer had her medical license, but you felt maybe you couldn't employ her because she might not think
mother-in-law.
Sorry, yeah.
Definitely
That's a good enough reason. Yeah.
Zero
That's a
respect.
good reason.
Has a different thinking, I think.
Yeah. No, I just think perhaps it points to, like how, where's the training in all of this and whose responsibility is it? I mean, Labour had that pledge in their manifesto for lifelong training, but also thinking, more on like a societal level, like who are the employers of the future? And I mean, there's been a massive shift recently not recently, over the past 20 years, from big kind of, car manufacturers being the big employers or the biggest, most powerful companies in the world to tech companies who don't come into a country and build a massive factory that employs people. The opposite happens, and yet they're the most powerful. And what's this going to mean for, work in general? And we're not just thinking about, my mum was in a privileged position and she had the balls to go and do something like that. But if you're, less trained prior to that and you're a gig economy worker, what kind of rights do you have and whose responsibility is it to look out for those people?
There's some really interesting perspectives in the workplace as well, because when people are made redundant, they often get like outplacement support, but I don't see the same support with retirement. Maybe they might get a watch. It depends how long they've been in the organisation, but I don't see that same level of support that someone might get when they're being made redundant. And I also think the role of management's really interesting. So in that, management was like a reward job. Like in that kind of promotion-y world, it was like, okay, you got to that level, you can be a manager. Whether or not you wanted to be a manager, to the point of your dad, maybe he was like, okay, I've done it because that was what I was supposed to do, but actually I don't love it. I've just ended up in this job. And I think management is a responsibility. It's not just a role. 70% of our engagement at work is dependent on the person that we work for. So if you've got someone who's a bit disengaged in being a manager and just doing it because it's the thing you do to get ahead in that old kind of structure, they're not creating psychological safety at work. They're not helping someone to individualise their work. They're not encouraging flexible work patterns because they don't care as much about the individual. They're just kind of treating it as a role. So I think it's a big role and responsibility for organisations to look at both of those things.
I think you've raised a point about preparing for retirement, and I think there's a really important signalling issue here. That whereas with redundancy, the outplacement support is about helping you to find another job, with retirement, the expectation is that you're going to stop work, even if you're not. And so employers don't see the need to provide any support at all to you to find another job because you're retiring, aren't you? You're just stopping. And I think also the employees themselves are in cahoots on this one. One of the big issues, I think, with the whole concept of retirement and retirement age and getting your pension is that what it signals is that, right, well done, good, faithful servants, now you can stop and put your feet up or go and do the things you've been dying to do for the last 50 years and not been able to. Rather than any sense of you simply moving on into another phase of your working life. So I think there are really issues with the way in which we talk about retirement, and maybe it's a term we shouldn't even use.
Steph?
Yeah, we have a member who takes a retirement year every 6 years, and he's done that throughout his career. And it's obviously quite a privileged position to be in order to be able to do that. But his reasoning behind it is, not only does it give you time to reflect, spend time with people you love, see places that you'd like to see, but it's doing it when you're, I suppose, young and able-bodied, because we like to assume that, we like to think that we're going to live long lives and enjoy, years of retirement, and, we save. But unfortunately, for some people, that just doesn't work out. And so I suppose his reasoning, as I understand it, is that, just in case he does drop dead at 60, he's,
He will have done it.
He will have done it. He'll have, been able to enjoy his money. Like I say, it's a privileged position to be in, but it's an interesting way, and also to think about it. And he, I suppose, with these years of retirement that he has, it takes time. He has the time to take stock, reflect on what he's doing, and so the job that he goes back to, and it changes quite often, is something that he's really engaged in, enjoys, and will be happy to do when he's much older. So yeah, it's interesting.
Dan, you mentioned someone similar, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I know exactly the same. An entrepreneur actually, who his reasoning as a young man was like, I don't want to spend my retirement being old. So like, it makes much more sense to spend it when I'm young. But I guess with the economic reality being that most people are not going to have retirements, most of us are not going to have real retirements. And that only really dawned on me in the last couple of months, actually, as I've been coming to these sessions. It made me think a lot about the kind of the tolerability of work, and how many people I know who are like, I can do this because like I'm putting the money away, or I'm going to pay off the mortgage, and I'm going to be in a position for some period to be able to.
The what ability of work?
Like the tolerability.
Tolerability.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
right,
it's like
yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who are a long way away from any aspirational engagement with their work, and are more just like, I need to pay the school fees and get through this bit, and then I'll figure out what happens afterwards. And that's like when there's a kind of logical endpoint, you know, in the kind of historical third age, as you like, I think that very much changed the viewpoint. You're like, it's a thing I've got to do, and I'm going to get to the end. But when I imagined that I probably have another, touch wood, 50 or 60 years of work left, I was really struck by, well, then it cannot be a thing to be tolerated. Like, it has to be a thing. Like,
to be enjoyed.
Yeah, and and that, whether that's 70-hour weeks or 30-hour weeks, or if it's engaging and, if it's more people-focused or more management-focused, I think is very specific to the individual. But I guess I'm hopefully not where I work, but I'm mostly struck by my peer group at how most people see work as a burden to be carried rather than something they revel in, and a lot of how they cope with that burden is with its imagined ending. So I think there might be something healthy in imagining, shit, if I had to do this for 50 years, what would I do?
Yeah.
Even if it was multiple things, but I wouldn't keep doing this.
Yeah.
My name's Henry.
Hi, Henry.
I'm a project manager for a construction company. And when I was younger, so I've worked for them for quite a long time, and I witnessed quite a few guys who were on the tools who worked for 40 years and then retired and then died within like 6 months. And it might be genetics, it might be just chance, but I just think that's a real shame, because they've saved all their lives and then they don't get a chance to enjoy it. I think part of it might be that they feel a little bit obsolete, because they feel that it's almost like those skills have died with them. I think it'd be quite nice if there was a way of introducing like young people into a company like that with old guys kind of shadowing them and showing them skills like that, because there are skills that are dying in construction, like ageing workforce is a massive problem. And the job that I'm on at the moment is a heritage job in central London, and there's a lot of things that we're not able to replicate because those skills are gone.
Really?
Yeah, we kind of had to redesign it because it either take 20 years to do, or the guys that can do it just don't exist anymore.
That's amazing.
So I just think it would be quite a nice way of bridging the gap, because I think a lot of young people coming through it in such a hurry to earn money and do something. And if it was a longer lifespan that you work for, maybe you wouldn't be in such a hurry, and actually you could, get a trade that you're really passionate about and really good at.
Okay, thanks, Henry. Anyone else? The lady at the back end. Is it Joe?
Yeah, Joe, I just wanted to pick up the point that was made by the gentleman about the future of work and how it's changing, and I just wanted to focus on the changing definition of a worker and how it's sort of moving from employee to self-employee, and the growth of the gig economy and what that means for the retirement system. Currently, if you're an employee, you get benefits. You can get automatically enrolled into a workplace pension by your employer will pay into it for you if you meet certain eligibility criteria. But if you're not an employee, you don't fit into the retirement system. The retirement system is not designed in this country or in most advanced countries for self-employed workers and for the gig economy, which just 2 days ago it tipped over the 5 million mark. Self-employed workers are racing ahead in this country, and the fastest growth is in female workers. And a lot of people don't get choice; they just get offered a 0 hours contract. So this is, choice is a wonderful thing to have if you can move around. But for most people, and for growing numbers of younger people, and particularly older workers over 50, they're not getting an option other than a 0 hours contract, which offers them no pension benefits.
Which is doubly bad, because it will normally also exclude them from the mortgage market, which means they can't own property, which means they can't develop a nest egg. So it's It's kind of I think it's
cyclical.
a pretty nasty, vicious circle in there.
Yeah. Is there another hand? Liz at the back, my colleague Liz.
Liz, I work at Tortoise. I was talking to a colleague here at Tortoise today about this thinking, and he said that he was kind of 2-3 years away from retirement age, and I was surprised to hear him say that he strongly believed that there should be enforced retirement at a certain point in time, and I was surprised to hear him say that, and I said, oh, what's that to do with? And he said, oh, because, to paraphrase, he sort of said, well, you know, you get to be in a nice cushy job, the more senior you get, the less you actually have to do, you're coining it in, and actually what should happen is that us old duffers should be shunted out the way to give the young people a chance. That was the sort of essence of it. And clearly, you know, that seemed to me like there are those types of roles, although they exist, they're perhaps not the majority of people's working realities, and it's not how family structures are. And I was sort of reflecting on it and trying to square the circle with the thinking we had on Tuesday morning, which was with an economist called Daniel Susskind, who's written a book called A World Without Work. And his thesis is, fast forward perhaps 20, 30 years, he doesn't put a time horizon on it. And the reality of automation is there aren't going to be enough jobs for everybody. So very many more of us at all ages across the workforce won't have a job because the robots will do the work. And a big part, and there's loads of stuff in the book, it's interesting, but that has a bearing on this question. And one of the things that he raised was that it's not so much about whether you want to work, but what work is available and whether you're prepared to do it. One of the types of work that is currently massively undervalued in the labour market, and people don't want to do, is care work, but that is the one kind of work that a robot can't do. It really genuinely can't and never could do. And so I'm kind of interested in how the workforce is redesigned, kind of thinking, I think the gig economy element is true and is real and something to think about, but it's also what are the jobs going to be for human beings to do, and who will be able to do them and who will want to do them is something that I'm kind of interested in, the shape of things, because certainly we you know, an older person and a younger person will have very different dispositions towards the idea of working in certain elements of the care sector.
That's a really good point. Funny what you were just saying about the older people sort of sitting in those top jobs, because, you know, I was explaining before that I lived in California for a bit, and I met someone really senior at Google, and I thought, oh, everyone at Google must be working really, really hard, really senior. And she said, no, everyone's just resting and vesting at my level. It's just hanging out, waiting for your shares to accumulate until you retire. And that phrase, resting and vesting, rather stayed with me. I do have one more slide, I think, which is about that idea of retirement. So this was this idea of retiring the word retirement that you were talking about, which is, apart from the sort of, you know, necessity of you know, working for money, what we sort of come to realise is actually working is good for you. It's good for sort of keeping you mentally alive. And actually, Dan, that point that you said that I saw lots of people nod at the start when you said that your mother-in-law, what you actually saw in her when she retired was depression, was the word you used. And I saw a lot of people nod as if they'd seen a similar experience. Does anyone else feel able to talk about that? And, you know, there's a hand there. What's your name, sir?
My name's John. I'm not, it's not a specific kind of thing, but most men that I know who are older, who have retired and done that sudden stop thing, yeah, they do get depressed. I'm pretty sure it probably happens to, or has historically happened to women as well when they exit the workforce to have children, and that probably, you know, plays into a lot of postnatal things as well. So yeah, I definitely think that I mean, one of the problems, I thought what Henry said was really interesting about the guys on the Labour side. Now, those guys probably spent 40 years thinking, I can't wait to the day I retire.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And then, so it's not as if they're kind of not being forced out of the workforce. They're desperate to get out of the workforce probably by that point. But then it's, you know, you lose your status, you lose your earning power, you lose your identity.
Structure, you know.
And it's such a sudden stop, and also, you're not psychologically prepared for that, I don't think, because it's the big gap between, oh, I really was looking forward to this, and suddenly it's such a big transition. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, I think this is 100% true.
And the lady here.
The point I made was something that was mentioned earlier about preparation for retirement, because I was lucky enough to retire on a good pension 13 years ago, and I've not looked back. And I've
you love it.
Experience, freedom and variety, an intoxicating combination.
What's your name?
Jill.
Jill.
But it is about preparation, because I was fortunate being in an organisation where they did help us prepare for retirement. They gave us courses. They gave us how to, keep our health, keep our finances in good order.
Where did you work that they did that?
Sorry?
Where did you work that they did that for?
PwC.
PwC.
And so I had help to actually transition from the type of life I had at the time into the one that I wanted to have, which would, was a readjustment. But I think as well is that it's about continuity and what keeps your self-esteem high. And one of the things, if you've been in a good career, is about visibility and keeping your skills, staying in a position where you can use those skills, probably in a different environment, but you can use them. And so your self-esteem is still fed by the fact that you're useful, you're visible, and there's an element of continuity.
What were you doing for them at PwC?
I was in financial management, business strategy.
And how did you manage to keep those sort of skills alive, but while still being...
I became a non-exec in an NHS trust, primary care trust at the time. And so finance, financial skills were was what I was recruited for as a non-exec. So I had that element, and then I did some pro bono work and stuff like that. So, and then enjoyed myself. So,
so you're one of those sort of happy stories of I stopped and it's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I've since done a degree and a master's in psychology. So I've kept busy.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm sure I saw another hand. No.
I'll just touch on a perspective. So we, on our podcast, we had the MP Tracy Crouch, who was the UK's first Minister for Loneliness. And she came on and she talked actually about the impact of retirement, triggered by what you're saying, Henry, actually, about when people leave, like the psychological impact of that. But actually, the increase of loneliness that people feel after retirement is really, really significant because they lose a lot of the infrastructure and connection that they had through work. And if they maybe aren't, is it Jill, sorry? If they're not as proactive as Jill and they maybe don't have the support, then they're kind of at home and working out where is my sense of worth? Where are the people that I can engage with? And that has huge, huge implications on mental health. And I was looking at some data ahead of tonight about life expectancy rates of people who are retired, and actually it dramatically reduces, doesn't it? If you kind of look at the data, when people retire, they don't live as long as people who stay working kind of beyond that. I thought it was really people who retire earlier, fascinating. You kind of have this mental health thing, maybe with loneliness, but then also kind of this physical.
Again, another page in this thing about 2 million people in England over the age of 75 live alone, and more than 1 million old people say they go for a month without speaking to a friend. A friend, family, neighbour, or a family member, which is amazing, really. I mean, that's obviously going to affect your mental health in a terrible way. And Dan, can just go back to your mother-in-law. I'm sorry to keep going on about your mother-in-law.
I think about it a lot too.
But you said that she'd suffered from depression, but you also said she got through it, and now she was sort of travelling and I
think it was not a dissimilar story. She found like kind of pro bono work to do, but I think it was interesting. I felt like because I was struck by there was no way she was like a consultant anaesthetist. So she definitely knew stuff, like meaningful amounts of stuff. And it seemed extraordinary to me that passing on that knowledge wouldn't have had value. But she didn't feel like once she lost her license that she was allowed in. Like that at that point, like she wasn't a doctor anymore, and she wouldn't be exactly up to date on the latest paper on X, Y, and Z, and she didn't have a right to be there. And so I think, and so much of her identity was sort of tied up in this kind of medical establishment. But yeah, I think it took quite a long time. But the thing that really struck me with her is like she's problematic on many levels, but extremely competent. Oh God, this is being videoed.
Thinks you're the best mother-in-law.
but was that actually, like, although, and I guess I touched on it earlier, a lot of the tooling and the vernacular of the modern workplace is very different. You know, Slack and Google Docs and agile project management and all of this. But like, most of work is like common sense, kindness, being able to communicate with people, being able to coach people. Like, these things haven't changed fundamentally over 50 years. So I just, I found it quite a sort of chastening thought on my part that I was having such a struggle imagining her in our workplace when 90% of what is extraordinary about her would have crossed over naturally. But this 10% of barriers are very real, and a bridge would need to be created.
Yeah, I mean, So I just want to go back to something that Liz said about the older people, because I am actually quite surprised at the number of people who are, I wonder if we're sort of representing that young audience enough who I know that I've worked with, and I think I was one once, if I'm completely honest, where, working at a place where there are a lot of old people who've been around for ages, and that, you're hungry to get on, and, I think we actually used to refer to them as sort of bed blockers in a way. It was like, come on, get out of the way, so, we're hungry and can get on. And I just wondered if anyone here had that, in all honesty, had that thought where they thought, I really want those people to retire so I can move on. No, is it just me? Am I the only one?
Am I allowed
Very exposing. There's a lady.
Am I allowed to say that I had exactly that experience when I was young? We called it dead men's shoes. And I was at the time working for a big bank, which had immense hierarchical levels with everybody who'd been promoted to their level of incompetence, the Peter principle. And getting them out of the way was incredibly hard. And it meant that younger people could not be promoted. It was absolutely gridlocked. And the hoops and loops we had to go through to actually try and get people pay rises even.
Yeah.
Because the pay rises were all linked to the grades, and you couldn't go up a grade because there was already somebody in that grade, and it went on like that. And I mean, it's the problem with hierarchical systems, really, in a way. Flattening your hierarchy deals with that problem, because it means you're moving people sideways all the time rather than saying you've got to climb the ladder. So I find it a bit disturbing that people are still talking about that existing now. Surely it's time we have moved on from that.
I think that's why people move jobs quite frequently these days, especially in certain industries. It's almost a norm in like creative industries to move every 2 years now, and that's partly for that reason, I think, which is a shame.
There are a couple of hands at the back. First of all, that lady, and then that gentleman there.
Sorry, Fiona. I just want to say, I think it's very difficult if you're hoping to work later and you might be in your early 50s, and the message you're getting is, you should be preparing younger people to be coming through, and that sort of leaves you thinking, okay, that message is quite clear then, what are you supposed to do for the next 16 years? Or where are the places that are going to be happy to employ you? But also, there's often a lot of young people coming in, teaching Slack, whatever it is, SEO, I don't know. There never ever seems to be any sort of reverse mentoring. The experience that has accrued in older people's working lives, I think Dan said, you just walk out of the door, that's gone. There is a value there in putting that forward to younger people. They know about new systems, but maybe not more traditional ideas about working. Those haven't died.
I really feel like Slack is one of those things which is, it's really funny, because it's one of those things which I know some older people I've worked with are like, I'll do everything, but I won't do Slack. It's like one step too far in the thing that we're asking people to do, a new thing. You all mentioned it. It's like, oh, Slack, now there's Slack on top of everything. The gentleman there.
Hi, my name's Ray. Like Dan, I run a startup in the property industry. So I wanted to make 2 points. One is, it sounds like this part of the discussion is very much mirrored in what goes on in the property market. The people that got there first. And that's pretty much the end of the story. But it struck me that your point is incredibly important. There's this quote, and I don't know exactly, but humanity or civilization is the collection of our memories. And teaching and educating our young is what makes us human and civilized. And we're missing something when we're allowing all this wealth of knowledge to not come back into schools and not to be structured so that we get all that wisdom back right in those early years. Now, I got young kids, and you read all this stuff. If your kids' mental development is decided by what they do in their first 2 years, and like, shit, I didn't do enough. and like, if they don't have 12 hours sleep, their mental development's not going to work. I'm like, crap, they didn't sleep enough, too much TV. But we don't have the knowledge, right? We haven't lived long enough. I'm 37. I have some experience, but it can't possibly compare to someone who's at the retirement age.
Thank you so much. What's your name?
Ray.
Ray, thank you. I've just noticed that Agatha has made her way to the end of the hour, so I'm going to do an attempt to sum up some of the brilliant contributions you have all made. Thank you so much for starting and tolerating my tube story, which doesn't sound like it's true, but genuinely was. Helen, it's been great to have your expertise here talking about, your squiggly career and how we've moved on from the 3 stages of education, work and retirement and the sort of staircase that we're used to. I'm really interested, obviously it's mirrored around the conversation, that organisations have become flatter. And obviously, as you said, that's really good in some cases, that we're stopping this sort of bed blocking thing, obviously, and it used to annoy me a lot when I was younger. But obviously it's going to create problems as well, and I think it's quite interesting hearing both aspects of that. Dan, to hear you talk, you're such a great representation of the tech industry. No, you're pulling a face like I'm going to say something terrible. No, but the pressure's on you, to employ young people, move fast, break things, and then live a life of philanthropy is really, really interesting. And actually, you've talked really warmly and interestingly about your own personal experience with your mother-in-law and witnessing her going through that stage of having work cut off and the problems with that. I mean, it's obvious that we are all going to have to work longer, and I thought you said something really interesting about how the whole, this series has made you think about not just the tolerability of work, but the fact that we have to enjoy what we do. If we're going to live longer, it's going to force us to think about, have that sort of internal conversation about what it is we want to do if we're going to do it for so much longer. Because I think it was you that said that thing about how so much of our structure is set up, not just for people living a short life, but again, it's not for working parents, it's not for people who need to care. It's too much of the system is based on when men went out to work and women stayed at home, and so many of the problems we have come from that. Harriet, you talked really wonderfully about your own experience of going back to work and having to deal with Slack, amongst other things. But Joe, I think, Joe, you made brilliant points about how, you said just 2 days ago or something, we'd flipped from going from a more employed nation to a more self-employed nation, and the sort of gig economy means that we're just storing up problems for the future. I know we'd all love to go and spend a year in not Arctic Norway, but somewhere lovely if we could, but not everyone can, and there's a sense that the structure around us getting old, plus the sort of threats of AI and the gig economy, are things which are going to crash together potentially in a difficult way. And I know a few people talked about how organisations had supported them to retrain, and it really feels like there needs to be some sort of government or cross-company support system to help us through this, because obviously we're getting older, but we all want to work and do interesting things, so it's going to be a real challenge for the time ahead. So thank you all for your contributions. Do stay and have a chat and speak to Helen about her book, and thank you all for coming, and I hope you'll come again.